Hello, my name is Chad Bartolone. I'm a student at the Indiana University School of Social Work. I participate in an internship at the nonprofit Unity Gardens located on the west side of South Bend. I was given an assignment to identify a group or people that trigger me um, when encountering them during my internship. When I think of the word triggering, uh, I think of it as a verb that takes hold of me subjectively. So that is to say that in popular media, when I see videos that exhibit trigger warnings um, before they present uncomfortable material, I think of this in its inverse, where this is something that is not dependent on what happens in my exterior world. There's a stimuli that comes in. That person or that group doesn't have to do anything, but for some reason, I have this inner reaction that stimulates an emotion within me. I can postulate all day about what that person was doing or what they were thinking, and I'll flesh that out a minute in some stuff I wrote down. Uh, but at the end of the day, all I can really do is question what's going on inside of me. Um, I really enjoy my internship at Unity Gardens. They welcome anyone that comes into the garden to pick for free. The majority of the people that come into the garden, though, are predominantly lower socioeconomic status folks that live on the west side of South Bend. Curiously enough, before I came to the social work program, I was a firefighter in the city of South Bend and a paramedic for nearly 20 years, both in Indiana and up in Michigan. Many of the people that frequent the garden are also people that I had interactions with during my time at the fire department. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to see a life from a completely different perspective and enrich what was already there. The west side of South Bend is home to a significant amount of people that suffer from food insecurity and require assistance just to make ends meet. I have figures from the Portage Township trustee that identifies the applicants to assistance programs or assistance within Portage Township. Now, when they reach out to the trustee, they've exhausted all of their efforts with nonprofits, with churches. All avenues have been broached. 75% of the applicants are black, 20% are white, and 4% are Hispanic. Now that harvest is done, I often wonder about the people that come into the garden, and I worry about them and how they'll find food, how they'll find fresh food, nutritious food. That area is also home to many food deserts, wherein the distance to a grocery store is far greater. And Unity Gardens during the harvest times when there's plentiful food is a way for people to fill those gaps. I wrote down some thoughts for this assignment, and oftentimes I don't like to read from notes, but this ended up becoming something great, not greater, but this ended up becoming something more surmountable than just a few cliff notes. So if I could, I'd like to read from this and then fill in the rest of the gaps for the assignment. Why don't I like rich white people as a stereotype? Rich white people run the government. Rich white people run the Congress. Rich white people own most of the big businesses and banks. Big business is owned by big banks. Big banks trade in businesses that pollute the planet and make it unlivable for almost everyone else. Companies those banks trade in also reduce individual liberties by operating as anti-democratic authorities to their employers or their employees, therefore concentrating both power and wealth from their consumers and workers alike. Big business then buys members of Congress through legal bribery, often drafting their legislation for them. Makes you wonder why the Congress, made up mostly of lawyers, included all those loopholes in the first place. They couldn't have all been on GHB and cheated their way through law school, could they? Congress cuts funding to the states. States privatize public resources. Resources such as schools, emergency services, infrastructure, and now mass public surveillance. Public employees, those naughty, unaccountable bureaucrats we all like to remind ourselves and others aren't democratically elected, are replaced with replaceable non-union employees at a steal, like the South Bend Cubs, who replace moonlighting firefighters with work release inmates from the South Bend Reentry Center. And this is nothing against them. I've worked alongside men from that center. They work, laugh, they share and debate with as much conviction as any firefighter I know. And firefighters, they know how much they're worth. And so do the Cubs. And they know how much the fellas at the Reentry Center are worth too. And so do I. Less than minimum wage. Thanks to a provision in the 13th Amendment that permits legal slavery for convicted criminals of the state. That means the Cubs are doing them a favor. Moreover, the state takes nearly 60% of their wages for a victims' recovery fund administered by private charities. States and local governments continue to privatize formerly public spaces and institutions where those private businesses are not required by law to abide by the Constitution. The First Amendment only applies to government's infringement thereupon its citizens. Business leaders and government officials from our locality to the Supreme Court play musical chairs while their handshakes carve the country up further. Why do I dislike rich white people as a stereotype? Because this back and forth horse trading of people and natural resources is funded and maintained by the American military and the CIA, ran by rich white businessmen who throughout their history have worked with and trained far-right, often fascist militias, who then executed brutal and dictatorial takeovers of democratically elected leaders in mostly black and brown countries. The CIA pays for its spy warfare by brokering drug shipments from places like Latin America, China, and Afghanistan to poor communities all throughout the United States. Their good friends over at the FBI then set up, arrest, and occasionally assassinate black leaders who try and improve their communities or expose the government's lies and corruption. Do you know why the mafia exists? So the government can look upon itself, look upon its own reflection, and lose itself long enough to say, boo. All of this is going on at the same time the lady at Joann's is holding up the forming line over a 20% discount with a designer purse in hand. No awareness of anyone or the world around her. An independent agent interacting with a bunch of non-playable characters. Why are they non-playable? They, or the people around them, well-intended as they may have been, have likely bought them out of and sheltered them from the realities of anyone that doesn't look or play the part. Is she aware of everything I've described that affords the lifestyle our society is clamoring for? She isn't aware of the family of 4 behind her, nor the 6 or 7 other families who, despite their own busy and complicated lives, haven't wrung this woman's neck. Civility at its best. Civility may prevent our feelings from being hurt in public, but it is also the veil that the powerful owners of this country hide behind and have used to justify murdering anyone who didn't give up that which they wanted and couldn't buy at a fraction of its worth from the locals. Whether it be in speeches, media, or through the stories that have been gifted to me directly, the most repeated complaint that I have heard from members and elders of the American Indian nations of what is often regarded as the white nation is a story of betrayal through crafty language and ruthless enforcement of confusing laws and treaties, all perpetuated by a civil people. And so often I project all of that onto so many of the customers and patrons that look and play the part, if you will. The view in the distance, it usually affords me time to reorient myself to the approaching patron. They don't know I'm thinking all of this. How could they? And by that same measure, how can I presume to know what they are thinking? And in this way, I think it's a sense of entitlement that does it for me. In them or in me is up for grabs. The eye cannot see itself though, and I'm not sure what faces I make during these engagements, though I've been told I'm a terrible poker player. I suppose I get angry because I assume that the people with money should have time to investigate what facilitated that wealth. Perhaps they know and are a full partner in the suffering of others. Perhaps they're asleep, if you will. Just as many of the people I worked with that were poorly educated, who were exhausted and would accept low-hanging fruit, such as their problems being because of the blacks, gays, unions, or women. Too tired to wonder why those narratives were tolerated by management, but questioning the boss was a surefire way to termination or punishment. Are too tired to care? Whatever the reasoning, I begin to see two sides of the same coin, and in the same way myself. That is to say that Hitler, the fascist that lies inside of myself, and my anger towards what I regard as faulty thinking. After all, who guards the guards? In my own right, I was poor and dirty, rich and dirty, now poor and disorganized. A recovering bureaucrat, I now seek the necessary precision of government work. I likely disassociated with some of the more vivid memories of how those tools kept myself and sometimes other people alive. You'd think I'd love rich white men. If what I have to say is truly valuable, those banks I disdain so much will have to hold some of that money, right? I can't keep it all buried in the backyard. My distrust of the government doesn't change the melanin in my skin either. It just makes me a walking contradiction. Besides, Nixon's domestic policy guy let the cat out of the bag on that one. It was never about race for them. It was about money, influence, and power. This rapacious institutional inbreeding of tumor-like growth has traded culture for convenience, and it's outsourced everything uncomfortable whoever is casted into its Indeed queries and their overseas equivalents. It has conflated our understanding of equanimity and replaced its measure of value with better us than them. Dog eat dog to combat tribalism. And it retains a class of people, too, to keep the coal fires burning so the dancing can continue on the ballroom floor all night. And everybody collapses in the morning, except the workers, who start their second jobs cleaning up the messes from the night before. Don't get me wrong. I am not making a direct affront to white people. I'm not much for self-deprecating humor. it's lowbrow. I feel this way around anyone whose narratives with who uses these narratives with soft language they can't back up and promises they can't keep. George Carlin talked about how soft language was that which takes the life out of life. He said that in the West, we as Americans use soft language to bullshit ourselves out of the uncomfortable realities of life. The West isn't a race as much as the American Republicans would like us to believe. The West is an ideology, a lifestyle. Where my internship is situated, when I'm at the farmer's market, I get a lot of examples of people who share my ancestry, but none of my shopping locations, nor any of the interactions that I have with the welfare office. I remember on the ambulance I would be screamed at by people I sympathized with, lied to by people I identified with, spit on by people who grew up near me. They didn't know me, and I was just another white guy with a badge. After countless happenings of the like, I remain. Yet I find myself angry at the sight of someone who pays a little extra for vegetables when they don't know what to do with them. They're literally throwing money at me. I can be polite to them and disagree with them, right? When I'm unable to see the present moment without it being clouded by my past experiences, I'm often double bound by or compelled to ascribe those experiences to the present moment. Same. Those experiences are this. I have been inside the homes of the rich and powerful when their kids overdosed on fentanyl, or the breadwinner died of the very cancers that bring death to the poor. Same. I have been in bedrooms in the most intimate of spaces. This is not a privilege I abuse, mind you. I never invaded spaces that weren't open to the eye, but I am a very observant person. And I listen to conversations too. I'm a people watcher. The people who make and enforce the rules are the ones who break them in greatest earnest. The judges, the politicians, the useful zealots, the enforcers, all hide behind their optics and attempt to deny or obscure their human shadows on one hand, while on the other, condemning or attempting to prevent other people from freely expressing themselves. They don't want to look in that mirror. I took notice in elementary school of my teachers and of the parishioners in my grandmother's church. They were all walking contradictions, but they wouldn't admit it. And the more power they had over people, perceived or realized, the more brutal their reactions would be when faced with their contradictions. Now, I know that's a lot. And oftentimes that's what ends up popping into my head when I'm at my internship, especially when I'm at the farmer's market. And the clientele that visit there are predominantly middle and upper middle class. Most of them don't know that stuff. Most of them are just living their life. And getting someone angry or having someone preconceived notions about what I might think about them because of contortions of my face is not going to invite a conversation where I can challenge any of that thinking if it's even there. I remember hearing a story about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's credited with creating the stages of death and dying, the 5 stages of death and dying. And when she was a young psychiatrist, she visited a concentration camp, and when she was being toured around the facility by a young woman, she took notice of the pillows that were stuffed with hair, the children's shoes, the writing on the walls. And then she found out that the young woman that worked there was a former prisoner of the camp whose parents and entire family had in fact died in the camp. She was the lone survivor of the family. And Dr. Ross asked her, how is it that you can work here day in and day out? How is it that you can find forgiveness for the Nazis and for the Germans who did this to your family? And what she told Dr. Ross was, it wasn't until I could see the Hitler inside of myself that forgiveness could grow, forgiveness could begin. And that story has meant a lot to me over the years, and I've thought often on it. And it doesn't negate that feeling that still comes inside of me, because all of those things that I said are true. But it would be denying the fascist within myself that would like to subvert those people. And by those people, who is that? Somebody that I might assume, or even if somebody that I've confirmed, is a part of any of that, whatever that is, it's something that we all have shared culpability in. So who do you point a finger at other than yourself? Because we're all a part of this. We're all part of that system that is slowly decaying the world in which we live in. And I suppose that's why I'm going to school, so that I can forge a path that says I'll do something different. And part of that is, if not all of that, is recognizing those parts within me that elicit an emotion, an angst, and anger, and trying to identify where that comes from, how that replicates in my own life and in the lives of others, the ripples in time that it creates, if you will. When I spoke with my field supervisor about this, about the dichotomy almost that was being created between people that came to the garden and people that came to the market. She shared her experience working in hospice, working with disabled children, and working with people with money and working with people who had very little. And it's not that she gave me answers per se, and I wasn't necessarily looking for any. She gave me the perspective of an older woman speaking to a younger man, and I dare not try and claim to have answers based on those interactions, because it'll likely take decades for those to form. I do, however, want to highlight the importance of human relationships as it relates to the code of ethics. Of all the code of ethics, that one in particular, it acknowledges that bias that I have within me. Because if not for the importance of human relationships, it would be easy to just cast aside that which is uncomfortable to me, that which I know is not me. But by doing so, I deny parts of myself. I deny their complementary opposite. I deny so many just human behaviors, and to ascribe them solely to a type of people, or as a result of money, it denies that which was there before the money was. The face before your mother or father was born, as they say in Taoism. This was a really interesting assignment. It really got me thinking, and I ended up writing quite a bit based on it. I imagine I'll probably end up writing more on it, because these feelings still come up from time to time. So I've appreciated having you as a professor, and I look forward to seeing you on campus and in the master's program. Salud.